Hey guys, this is Carmen with another sewing and DIY video. So today I'm going to show you guys how to sew French seams. So French seams are a really pretty finish because all of the raw edges are hidden inside the seam allowance. So this is a great finish for when you're sewing with lightweight or silky fabrics, and it's also really great for sheer fabrics such as lace. It's also a great option for those of you who may not have a serger yet. So I have here an example of a pair of pants that I sewed all with French seams. So you see how pretty that is? You can't see any raw edges anywhere. It's all pretty and encased inside, so let's get started. Okay, so I've got a couple squares of fabric prepared, and I've marked the wrong sides with W's, but it's kind of hard to see that in the video, so sorry about that. But the wrong side is basically just the side that you want on the inside of your garment, so not the pretty side. And now we are going to sew these pieces of fabric together with a French seam. So for a French seam, the first thing that we're going to do is pin the edges of the fabric together with the wrong sides touching. This is going to be the opposite of what you would do with a regular seam, where you would sew the fabric together with the right sides touching. Alright, let's take it to the sewing machine. Okay, now we're at the sewing machine, and you're going to want to sew these together with half of your seam allowance. So for this, I assume that my seam allowance was a 1/2 inch, so I am sewing these together 1/4 inch from the raw edges. Alright, so now we've got it sewn together, and we can grab the scissors, and you're going to want to trim the seam allowance down to 1/8 of an inch. Alright, now we need to take this to the ironing board. Okay, so next we need to iron the seam allowance to one side. I like to iron my seam allowance from both sides of the fabric just to make sure that I get it really nice. So just try to get things as nice and flat as possible. And then we're going to fold the fabric over so that the right sides are touching, and then iron this nice and flat. So now your raw edges are on the inside. And once you get it ironed nice and flat, you can put a few pins in to hold everything in place. Okay, and now we're off to the sewing machine again. Alright, so here I have my fabric with the right sides together now, and I'm going to sew this seam again. So I'm sewing with half of my seam allowance again, so it's going to be 1/4 inch from the edge. So after the seam has been sewn again, I'll have used up the entire 1/2 inch seam allowance. So this is going to leave your raw edges encased inside the seam so you can't see them. Okay, so we're back to the ironing board one more time, and now your seam is all done and nice and pretty, so all that's left to do is just to iron the seam allowance to one side. So if you're making some sort of piece of clothing, you're typically going to want to iron your seam allowance towards the back of the garment. Alright, thanks for watching, and go sew some French seams. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.